Here's a question I get asked frequently. How do I help my husband? He's so depressed. I'm always the positive one, and he is such a drag. Now, here's the crazy thing. This wife might actually be inviting that negativity with her over-positivity. One really fascinating aspect of relationships is how we sometimes create a dynamic that fuels the opposite of what we're trying to create. So an easy example of this is a girl who so badly wants attention from her crush that she's overbearing. She tries so hard to get close by writing notes and sitting with him and pushing for closeness that he reacts by pushing her away. She wanted closeness, but her overbearing attempts ended up getting the exact opposite reaction from him. In our family systems, this is called homeostasis. This means the inherent nature of systems is that they like to remain balanced or stable. They resist change, and after something changes, they try to revert back to the old status quickly. If that fails, they seek a new balance. So imagine oil and water in a bottle. When things are still, they're separated. And when you shake them up, they blend together briefly. So this is like someone who learns some new skills or techniques to manage their stress or depression. But oil and water want to be separate, so they revert back to their old balance. Oil on top, water on bottom. In a family, when someone tries to change their behaviors, there's going to be some resistance. So, for example, someone who has traditionally been a people pleaser and they've always just kind of gone along with everything, if they go to therapy and they start learning to express their wants or to speak up for themselves, people in the family are going to resist them by acting like they're being very rude or wondering what's happened or confronting them and pushing back on their attempts to assert themselves. So the family seeks that old balance, that old status quo that they were used to, even if it's unhealthy. In order to create a lasting change with oil and water, you've got to add a homogenizer, something that helps things retain a new balance. So if you add a homogenizer like dish soap, then the oil and water, when shaken up, create a new balance. They are now blended together and they'll stay that way. And so the change process in families often requires a homogenizer. It requires something that helps the new balance stay working. And sometimes that's just time, so sticking with those new behaviors for a length of time. And sometimes that's helping other people meet the function and the needs of those old behaviors in a new way. And, family therapy is intended to help shift that balance in the family, shift that status quo to something new and more functional. So what does this mean? People inherently resist change, and they inherently seek balance. So some familiar examples are, sometimes people seek balance by recreating the environment they grew up in, because that's what feels natural and normal for them. I mean, how many people have you heard say, "I'm turning into my mom"? Let me give another example of polarization. In my family, when one person is getting all stressed out and planning some big event, the others take a chill, like I'll go with it type approach. If everyone got hyped up, then there would be even more stress and tension. So to balance things out, one person chills. Now, this isn't a conscious choice, it's an intuitive reaction. When taken to the extreme, this could lead to one person assuming the passive role to make up for the other person assuming the do-it-all role. And the problem with this isn't that each person is working to keep things balanced, but rather the problem is that when these roles become rigid and repetitive and inflexible, then one person almost always has to take the role of the chill person, and the other person always has to take the role of the do-it-all. The most classic example of this is polarizing. So if one spouse is being really negative, then the other takes the role of being super positive. The more negative the one, the more positive the other. They're trying to balance each other out, but the gap between them just grows. This becomes especially problematic if each person progressively becomes further and further from the center. This can create an escalating cycle that's hard to step out of. Sometimes we're positive just to be oppositional, just to oppose our family member. I've even been in relationships where we basically took turns being sad or overwhelmed because it was a way to connect. So if we want to break out of these negative cycles and improve our roles, we have to be really intentional and flexible. Family therapists are specialists at identifying roles and helping people create systemic change, a new normal environment in your home. One of the things they might recommend is this. If you catch yourself in a cycle of polarization, so one person being really positive and the other person being really negative, you try to put yourself side by side with them instead of opposing them. That usually means going back to empathy. So a statement like, "Look on the bright side," usually evokes a polarizing response. "Here's all the reasons why my life sucks," right? Empathic statements like, "Ooh, sounds like you're having a hard time right now," can draw you together. Making statements like, "How can we work together toward a solution?" can also build closeness instead of polarization. We aren't just trying to create like a balance in relationship roles, we're actually striving for closeness, because you can be really balanced but on complete opposite ends of this teeter-totter. So this requires us to be flexible, empathic, and intentional. Drawing together also means not taking over for someone. It means trusting them to be able to handle things, acknowledging their strengths and capabilities, and not using their weaknesses as your source of identity. So having this image of yourself like, "I'm the positive one on the relationship," or "I'm the hard worker in the marriage," that fosters that rigidity and invites an environment where the other person underperforms, which is subconsciously supporting your identity. Needing things to be done in the right way can also lead to a feeling of, "Why am I the only one who ever does things around here?" Right? What this all comes down to is understanding how your half of the cycle is inviting the other person's behaviors. So if you're feeling stuck being the positive one, or the only one who gets anything done around here, then checking yourself and what you're inviting may be more effective at creating change than trying to get the other person to change. So if your problem is polarization with positivity, I'm not saying that you should start to be more negative. You can stay positive while trying to close the gap between you and them by showing empathy. Focus on understanding. Perhaps the problem is not the thing they're talking about, but they're complaining just to feel important to you, or they want to feel validated. They're seeking connection. They want to matter to you or feel understood. Emotions are stored in our mammalian brain. That means that many of them are really about connection. So look for what's underneath that content. If your problem is overwork, underwork, allow them to have responsibilities and allow them to fail occasionally and to have those natural consequences apply. These are the outcomes that come naturally. Check yourself for enabling behaviors. Look out for rescuing behaviors. These attempts to help too much are usually more about you and your need to fix someone instead of about actually helping others. If you can identify your contribution to the cycle, then you can take practical action to create change. As usual, I recommend working with a therapist to help you identify specific ways that you can change. Another helpful resource is the book, The Anatomy of Peace. It can help you identify these self-justifying images that you're taking on yourself and see the harm that they're causing and replace them with a more flexible and, heart-based approach to your role in this system. I'm excited to announce my upcoming course called How to Help: Powerful Tools to Help When Someone You Love Struggles with Mental Health. I'll be including some videos here, but the full course is on udemy.com and is going to include over 40 instructional videos outlining specific ways to help someone with depression, anxiety, or other mental health concerns.